For today's video, I headed straight back into the sewer level that is Craigslist to try and wrangle a Razer branded crocodile. Actually, come to think of it, the last two things that I bought on Craigslist, I had a pretty good experience with. So it seems like with Craigslist, there's no middle ground. You either have an amazing experience covered in unicorn smiles and sunshine, or you catch gonorrhea. It's one of the two. Anyway, getting back into the video, I bought a 6-year-old Razer Blade Gaming Laptop, which are supposedly the cream of the crop, to see how well it holds up in 2020, and if you can still game with it. Being a peasant gamer, this is the first Razer laptop I've ever interacted with, and I'm genuinely really excited to have a look at it. This is also a 6-year-old laptop, so it's going to give us a good indication of how well these laptops hold up over time. This 6-year-old Razer Blade 14 cost me 550 Canadian drachmi, which, considering what it is, I actually think is a pretty decent price. Now, as you can see, it's got a D-brand skin on it, which is a bit of a leather effect to it. I'm not sure, but this may be as old as the laptop, and if it is, it's held up very well over 6 years. D-brand can be very proud of themselves with this. On the other side, we've got a lot of fingerprints. We've got these two vents. Thermals will also test. I'm going to open up the laptop as well, and then we're going to repaste it and see what kind of temperature differences it makes. Yeah, you can see here that the rubber feet are starting to come off, but that's really easy to fix. You can just kind of glue it back on. On the sides of the laptop, as you can see, we've got quite a bit of wear. But what's really nice about it is that it wears very gracefully. Because with the more plastic fantastic style laptops, after 3 years, they feel kind of like they've been stored in an orifice for centuries. Whereas this, like, the paint just gets worn off of the metal, and it has a really nice kind of used vibe to it. It reminds me a bit of a nicely worn in guitar. Here we've got the power jack port thing, and then we've got two USB 3 ports, a microphone headphone jack, and then on the other side we've got another USB port, an HDMI port, which is also very well used, and a Kensington lock. But anyway, let's open it up and see if it passes the single hand open test. Yes, it does very well, actually. I've never had a laptop do that so well, so that's nice. On the inside, you can see we've got another D-brand skin on the actual trackpad with the little clicky buttons on the bottom. The person I bought it from did tell me that these clicky buttons aren't working very well anymore, so we'll have a look at that later. The keyboard's nice and oily, which we'll also try and clean off, but the key strokes still feel quite nice. We've got the speaker grills and then the power button. Again, the laptop still feels really nice. It still feels like an expensive device, which is pretty cool. The screen, you can see, has a glass front, which again is something I really like. It makes it feel much less cheap. There are some very big bezels around here. This is the 4K IGZO display, which is going to impact gaming performance quite hard, but we'll have a look at that a bit later. But one of the advantages of the big bezels, even though it does date it a bit compared to something like the Blade 15, is that you've got a really nice webcam placement with what looks like two microphone holes. Now we're going to open it up and see what it looks like inside and how well the thermal paste is aged and stuff like that. Okay, let's lift this off. There we go. It's a fairly sturdy bit of metal. And then that is the bottom of the laptop. Oh, that looks pretty good. There's not much battery swelling, so that's a good sign. That's interesting. That looks like the RAM has actually been soldered on, which is not great because it means that you can't really upgrade it after the fact. As far as I know, I think this laptop has 8 gigs of RAM in it, which kind of sucks. One of the things that makes this Razer Blade interesting, aside from its very emo name, is the GPU that it has in it, which is an NVIDIA GTX 870M. Now, there was never a desktop 800 series of GPUs, they only had them in mobile form. So this is the first 800 series GPU I've ever seen, and that's the kind of thing that makes a nerd like me all hot and bothered. With that, let's take this cooler off and have a look at the thermal paste situation, which may be pretty dry. Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward to get off. You just kind of... Okay, so now we're just gonna gently lift this bad boy off. Okay, there doesn't seem to be much of a gentle involved here. Just gently start prying things Oh, there we go. There we go. There's some movement. Ugh. So many thermal pads on the base for that. That's all for the power delivery, which I'll show you more closely just now. And then the thermal paste is still nice and wet. You've got some real chonky heat pipes going here to these little heat sinks. So on the bottom of that, we've got a huge GPU. Look at that beast. And then this is the CPU over here. And then the power delivery is what those heat pipes helped cool. I really love making content like this because it's just always so fun having a peek under the dress of some sexy hardware. That thermal paste is very wet. I think this laptop's been repasted at some point. I don't think I'm the first person to dig around in here. So just from trying to install the drivers, you can feel that this is an old laptop. It's definitely chugging along. And then the other issue is that it doesn't really have driver support anymore. I mean, the latest driver is from just over a year ago, which I find very weird because with older desktop GPUs like the 600 series, you still have modern driver support. And this 870M is essentially just a slightly cut down version of the GTX 680, which still has current driver support. So it seems as though Nvidia doesn't support the laptop versions of their GPUs as long as they do the desktop ones, which is a bit of an arbitrary move if you ask me. But anyway, let's see what kind of gaming performance we can get. Because of the driver version, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to use any screen capture, so we're going to have to just do it over camera. I'm going to start off with CSGO. We're in the menus and we're already sitting at like 84C on the GPU. So that's not ideal, but let's have a look. Okay, we're not cranked resolution-wise. So let's go all the way to 3200 by 800. I mean, we're gaming at almost 4K here with high-ish settings on CSGO. I'll drop them down a bit just now, see how much of a difference that makes. But look at that. So we're running low settings now, still at the max resolution of 3200 by 1800. And we're sitting at around 100 frames per second. I mean, this is playable. And if you plug this into like a 1080p monitor externally, you're gonna get way, oh, this person's got a scout. You're gonna get way better performance. Oh, look at that, GTA 5 at 3200 by 1800. And I mean, this is very playable. It's with lower settings, so I did drop the settings quite aggressively. But this is impressive. Oof, the temperatures did skyrocket really quickly though. I mean, you can see there we're on 87C with the GPU and 96C with the CPU. That's not great. Although the CPU utilization is only sitting at around 40%. So I think if we open it up and we do a bit of a CPU cooling mod on here and we attach an external GPU, we could get much better performance than this, but this is pretty impressive. See, this is exactly why the lack of driver support is an issue, because I think that this mobile GPU should be able to handle Doom Eternal, but it doesn't work. So you can say yes, play, and then it just doesn't launch. So let's try Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Maybe that'll work. The bezels on this display are real thick. Oh, problem has occurred with your display driver. Damn you, Nvidia! Well, Battlefield 5 launched, so that's a good start. What we're gonna do, crank it all the way up. There we go, to the highest resolution that we can. This is probably not gonna go very well, but you know, this is like a console level frame rate. It's really difficult to aim because there's definite input lag here. You can actually, but honestly, the display on this laptop is one of the more beautiful displays I've seen in person. Dropping down to 1080p, we're sitting at almost 50 FPS, and it feels smooth. The frame pacing's good. This is actually a pretty good gaming experience with Battlefield 5 on low settings. Okay, well, Crysis Remastered has launched, but I mean, it's based on a game from 2007, so I'm sure drivers aren't a huge issue for it, but let's see how it runs at nearly 4K on this system. It's actually kind of running, which is pretty crazy, and considering just the way that the movement mechanics and stuff feels like in Crysis, 22 frames per second feels a lot like 60 frames per second on Crysis Remaster. I mean, I'm joking, it's not quite that bad. Look at that! At 1080p low settings, we're almost at 60 FPS. Let's try a slightly higher setting. Okay, well, unfortunately, high settings are not going as well, but still, we're sitting at about 23 FPS here. So I guess it can kind of run the new Crysis, which is, it honestly did a better job than I was expecting. In conclusion, this 6-year-old Razer Blade actually held up a lot better than I thought it was going to. Usually, in my experiences, laptops don't age very well. I don't know, maybe it's because I naturally produce cottage cheese from my hands, but yeah, I'm surprised at physically how well the laptop aged. And you can still game on it, which is pretty cool, especially considering the fact that I paid 550 Canadian Rand for it, so I'm pretty impressed. Although, it has 3 pretty big downsides. The first one, and the biggest, is the fact that Nvidia doesn't support the driver ecosystem anymore, which does have the suspicious stench of planned obsolescence to it, but anyway, we'll look past that. The second problem is the fact that it runs hotter than the surface fires of Mercury. And then the third problem is the fact that the RAM is soldered onto the laptop, so yeah, you can't really alleviate one of its biggest bottlenecks in my opinion, so that's a bit of a bummer. But what this experience made me really want to do is compare this 6-year-old Razer Blade to a modern Razer Blade. So Razer, if by some weird miracle you're watching this video, please send me a Razer Blade 15 so that I can pit these two laptops head to head in the deathmatch arena of death. So if you like the sound of that, like and subscribe to the channel for that video and other ones like that. And yeah, until the next video, bye bye.